Alright, this video we're going to start talking about building a front drive shaft for the '89 Chevy Mud Truck. This is going to be a little bit cobbled together, but we're sure we can make it strong. What we have here is some seamless. There's a little seam, but it's been milled down. This is like 2.5 quarter wall receiver tube, something you'd use on a truck hitch, which is why it's got the pinhole and the little ring at the end. This is a 2x2 quarter wall, which should slip directly inside of it without any interferences. So if we put these together, we got ourselves the basis for a drive shaft. And then Kevin picked up two different weldable yokes for the end. These both fit the 1310 U-joint. This one is supposed to be, I don't know what diameter tube it's supposed to fit. I guess it's not relevant. The idea is to get the smaller one, of course, on the 2x2. Get my crap out of the way. Pick that up. The idea is to get this one on the 2x2, but of course the original idea was going to be to grind this down on four sides so it could slip into the inner hole and it wouldn't be able to rotate, and then you just weld the outer seam. Clearly, from the size of it and how much you'd have to cut off, there would be nothing left of the walls. You'd have just 4 points in the corner, and that's just wouldn't be strong enough to hold anything. The weld would probably do the job, but we're not happy with that. So I'm not sure what Kevin's going to do on this end. Probably some type of build-up, see if he can find some square tube or something at work, weld it into it, have it come proud of this surface. That way it'll engage with this one. That way you can slip it in there and it would hold. We'll try to do the same thing on this one, but he'll probably just take a sliver of this, like a 3/4 or 1 inch section out of that one, set it in the end of this. It'll stand up proud, and then when he slips it in here, it'll engage and not rotate. And then what he can do, we'll cut this ring off. He can drill a hole in the very end right here. That way that point that's proud through there, he can weld to the top of it. Kind of doesn't translate very well through speech, but we're sure we can make it strong. It's just going to be a little bit cobbled together. We've done this on another truck before, and it's held up really well, but it was Toyota parts, and they have a little bit more meat in the stock part. This is a weldable aftermarket one, and it's the only thing we could seem to get. So I don't know how much this is going to get recorded. Some of the work's going to be done not inside this shop, so we will record what we can and try to make this video make some sense. And the length is not going to be super important, because this thing, we can cut the inner one and the outer one down as much as we need to make it fit in the truck, but we're sure we can have it long enough, because this is a 2 foot, what is this, 18-inch section? Mm-hmm. 18 and
2 foot. And
that's 2 foot, yeah, so we've got plenty here. What was the distance we need to cover? 32 inches or something like that?
No, I think it was only about 2 foot.
About 2 foot, so yeah, we should have plenty. It's not a very long drive shaft. And this, of course, is basically just like making a 4-spline drive shaft. This will forever slip in here, and there's no way you're going to tear that up. It might rattle, but we will resolve that as we keep going. So we've got a piece of 1.5 by 1.5 quarter wall sitting inside the large yoke end. We're going to be using the angle finder here to check the relationship between this edge and its squareness, along this plane and this plane. I think on this side we may just have to eyeball it, but we're going to try to get it in here as straight as we can and probably get like 4 tacks in the corners.
So yeah, it's probably cutting the welds where at the point of no return.
0-0, dead on. And that orientation, I feel good about it. Got it tacked in 4 corners. Did our best to zero it out as I showed in the video. The orientation in this direction we had to kind of eyeball, but we think that looks pretty good. I think he's going to go ahead and lay a bead in some of these sides.
that's it.
Alright, that drive shaft yoke that we had finished welding up and let cool down, we've now put it into the 2.5 by 2.5 quarter wall. So it sort of has splined itself in, and we've got 4 holes that we can plug weld. Well, now we're working on getting it as square to this tube as possible. This side we're just kind of forced to eyeball because we can't get a level on both sides of it. So we've got a pick in there holding it up on that side, and then we had zeroed it out on this side, and we're at, like, we had 0.1 a minute ago. We're getting very close. I mean, we're not even 1 degree off, 0.3, 0.2, and I'm rocking it because I'm unstable. We think that's about as close as we're going to get it. We think it looks pretty square from the top. Hopefully it focuses. So I think we're going to go ahead and tack it in there and just double check it again.
Get that water in there, sizzling.
Going to weld now? Or just attacking? Zoomed in a little tight, but whatever. Get it welded up. Continuing the work on the front drive shaft for the 89 Chevy. Today we're working on the front smaller portion. We've got this plug we made, basically kind of made a domed bottom to fit down inside this weldable yoke, and this got milled to be 1.5 by 1.5 square with the corners rounded. That square will drop right in the end of the shaft that we're going to use. We've already done our best to get this thing square in there in both directions, and you know, both of these planes adjusted, so we're feeling pretty good about it. I think it looks very close to square, so we're gonna go ahead and weld it in there. Alright, we're working on getting this drive shaft to a correct length. We actually just put the floor jack underneath this thing and picked it up as high as we could, then measured from the center of the U-joint for this yoke and the one of the transfer case under compression on this side. We were getting 30 3/4 of an inch. We then slipped the inner drive shaft portion in and marked it with this eye-to-eye yoke at the same measurement of 30 3/4. This is the mark that we came up with. That's where they engage at. So you have all the way to the end of this, and it would slide in about another 2 inches before it would bottom out. Being this is Kevin's truck, he wants a little bit more room just in case, because if it was to bottom out under compression or something, a hard hit, and these two ends banged into each other, it's going to hit the transfer case hard and it'll likely break it. So we're going to go ahead and cut 2 more inches off of this end. That way it can slide into the outer shaft over here, a total of about 4 inches. So I'll have 4 inches of up travel in the drive shaft. Down travel we're not worried about. We ended up with, I think, what was it, 10, about 10 and a half. With it compressed, we have 10 and a half to start dropping. So at ride height, I don't know what we have at ride height. We haven't checked it yet. It's less crucial, but I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 inches off of this, and then these two should be set to a good enough length to run. Just finished cutting down the inner drive shaft side. We've taken measurements of it, and he now has 4 inches of travel when he's already at compression on that driver or the passenger side. So he's got more than enough for this to slip inside. We think it'll be all right. Next, we're gonna go ahead and put these brand new Spicer U-joints in. Got the shot press in the corner you've seen us use, so make this job a lot easier. Alright, under the Chevy now, we're working on test fitting the upper. We're putting the bigger tube on the top. The problem we're running into is when somebody modified this cross member, if I can get the light to work, there's 2 square tubes, this one and the one in the back welded to it. We're pretty confident that when that's bolted in up there, it's going to bang into this one. So for now, we're just going to nip this off in 2 spots. And we have new straps to put in. And there's a bolt, you can just see it right in the center of the frame right now, that's stuck in that yoke. It's like somebody put a bolt in from the back side, then bolted the yoke on. So we're going to have to cut that bolt out of there and cut this cross member right here. And we're going to test fit it, and if everything looks good and all the straps are going to fit on this thing, we'll be getting that painted next.
Editing skills to work.
There aren't any skills. It's another day working on the Chevy Mud Truck. We ran into some issues previously with the single U-joint style drive shaft. Turns out it won't droop enough coming out of the transfer case to reach the pinion of the front axle. The solution is going to be to go to a double cardan. We're going to chop it up to lack of foresight. We kind of just didn't think about the limited angle of the single U-joint in this application. So, ordered a couple different parts. We got the H-yoke. We've got this one that we're going to go into the drive shaft in. And we got this one that's got the centering pin that goes to the yokes, the drive transfer case side. So like those go together. We just got this taped off for welding and splatter. And the H-yoke goes between them. So we're having to remake the fat side of the drive shaft. I'm going to take this yoke, drop it in this piece of it's like 1/8 inch 2x2, get it squared up and all the angles, and then this piece is going to drop back down into the original 2x2 quarter wall, 2.5 by 2.5 quarter wall. This is it's kind of turned into a cobbled mess, but we think this is going to be the best solution, and we should work just fine. We've got that yoke barely tacked to the inner square. We've set it down in there, kind of tapped it into place. Seems to be pretty square for what we're doing. Got it close to zeroed out. Yeah, there you go. So we just like this, gives us a lot more meat, but we're just a big old filling weld all the way around this thing. Alright, we just pressed in the first U-joint into the, whatever you want to call it, the fat side of the shaft. The next thing we've got to do is slip this H-yoke over the end here, one then the other, and press both caps into it. Alright, after getting that U-joint pressed in, the next part that goes on is this yoke. This one's going to go up against the transfer case output. It will still have a U-joint here. That's how it gets bolted to the transfer cases, like that. This half is going to go in there, so it's kind of going to look, get my hand right, look like that. On this, it has this centering ball in it that engages on that little post there. And in the center of that post is this little spring that keeps pressure on it. So these two will actually spline together. Well, not spline, but press together. This thing moves very nicely when it's all assembled, and it kind of keeps the whole assembly centered. So that's what we're going to do next. Add some extra grease probably in these pieces, spring in there, and get this thing pushed in here and get this U-joint pressed into this side. We're seeing that you have to get these caps on. There's this little lip here that keeps the two caps centered. Looks like you have to get those on before you actually press these in, otherwise you wouldn't be able to get those caps on. So looks good. Both of the caps are kind of sitting underneath this little tang. You good?
Yep.
Alright, recheck the focus. It's pretty good. And we're already recording. So, got a fresh set of bolts. Gonna bolt the double cardan up here on the yoke. Alright, we bolted the upper side in. It looks pretty good. Then we had to shorten the inner shaft a few inches because with the length of the double cardan, there's kind of less room for this inner shaft to slide up in. So we took about 3 inches off of this one. And now we're going to bolt this bottom on. We're doing better than last time. Before, this upper one wouldn't even point low enough to get to this yoke. It was up here. So we've gained some extra, and we know this thing drops to about down here based on, just where this drooped at. So getting this bolted on, we're going to roll it around a few times and see how it feels. That's all I did was snug this best I could by holding this.
Oh, smooth. And really, not that much splatter. Not like I was thinking.
So, we've kind of stated before that we know this isn't going to be a perfect drive shaft. There's going to be some wiggle in it. There's going to be some wobble. You can see as Kevin pushes on it, kind of up there. I mean, that's where your give is. The more the inner one is splined in, the less of that you're going to get. There's also always the option of like welding a bead down the corner of one of these and then grinding it off to take up some space inside. This is a mud truck. This drive shaft is not for street use. Disclaimer, don't put this on your street rig and expect it to work right. It's not going to be perfectly square. It's not going to balance. It's going to rattle. But you know what's not going to do is strip the splines or break, most likely. Only things we're really risking breaking is U-joints on one of the ends. That or we're going to break a U-joint on the axle shaft that we already fixed on that side, or, you know. The axle's more likely to break first. And if that breaks first, it's getting replaced with a 1-ton. But for now, this is looking like it's going to work. Which is really nice, because we had a high point of it's going to be good, and then it doesn't fit. And then back and forth with parts. So, at the moment, this is definitely feeling like a win on this project. Seems to turn nice and smooth, exactly like it needs to. I think the next thing we're probably going to do with this thing is actually test that transfer case. We have yet to confirm that it actually works properly. Now we have a drive shaft we actually can.